Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. We are in the second part of our Israel-Taiwan show. In the first part, we discussed geopolitical comparisons between Taiwan and Israel-Palestine. Today, we ask whether Taiwan's defense can learn lessons from Israel.
We are the Israel Defense Forces. For 72 years, you've heard our story. Tiny country surrounded by enemies, surviving against all odds.
The Israeli Defense Forces are at the core of Israeli society. We find out what difference this makes to Israel's security. Then,
我们要坚持贯彻新时代党解决台湾问题的总体方略，坚持一个中国原则和9·2共识，坚决反独促统。
Li Keqiang repeats the communist threat to unify with democratic Taiwan at the China People's Congress. At the same time, Beijing announces boosting military spending for the 8th year in a row. Plus, did you know that in the 1960s, Israel partnered with Taiwan under the martial law era Kuomintang or KMT to develop nuclear weapons, which ultimately didn't materialize? What triggered the program? Nuclear bomb tests undertaken by China. Here we can see the radioactive fallout detected in Japan. My guests today are Tony Hu, formerly U.S. Department of Defense Senior Director for China, Taiwan, Mongolia, also formerly American Institute in Taiwan Security Cooperation Office Deputy Chief, and Tony was also the Taiwan in-country manager for Raytheon Company, and Gemont Lalari, a retired U.S. Air Force Foreign Area Officer specializing in counterterrorism, irregular warfare and missile defense. He was a United States Air Force attaché in the Middle East and served in Iraq. Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs sponsored him as a Taiwan Fellow during 2022, and he will continue his research in 2023 at National Zhengzhou University in Taipei. Gemont, Mr. Hu, very warm welcome to the show today. But first, let's take a look at Israel and its neighbors. A small country around 2/3 the size of Taiwan, Israel is surrounded by Lebanon, Syria, Egypt and Jordan. The past 75 years have seen multiple wars and shifting borders between these neighbors and within Palestinian territory, some of which Israel currently occupies. We dealt with the politics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the first show. Today, we're focusing purely on the issue of defense for Taiwan and whether there are any lessons from Israel. Gemont, let me start with you. Can you compare Taiwan and Israel's security challenges?
Yes, so as in all cases, there's always similarities and differences. And I'm just going to highlight the similarities. Israel has been surrounded in the past by nations that wanted to destroy it. And Taiwan is surrounded or close to a country that is large, and Israel had to face those same problems. Mm-hmm. That's the big strategic picture.
Mr. Hu, how do you assess the level of threat for Taiwan from China?
Well, the threat is there and growing ever since Xi Jinping became the party chairman. She believes that he has a divine mission of a rejuvenation of China, which includes the annexation of Taiwan. So that is the major external threat. Of course, Taiwan also has an internal threat from China's information and psychological warfare, which caused disunity within Taiwan. And that actually is a significant threat because it affects the will to fight. Without the will to fight, it will affect whether there are friends who's willing to come to Taiwan's aid in case of Chinese attack.
Gemont.
So I would agree with what Tony said, but I would add that actually the Communist Party has always wanted to take over Taiwan since the very beginning time, and that Xi Jinping is just another face of that kind of threat. But
the threat has escalated, Mr.
Yeah,
Hu.
because the previous party chairman has the will but doesn't have the means. Right now, Xi Jinping is building that means, and in fact, he has accomplished significant achievements in building the ability for China to attack Taiwan.
William Burns of the CIA says that China has some doubts about its ability today, but of course the target is 2027. Do you believe that China will have the capability to invade by 2027?
Actually, we should look at it from a different way. If Taiwan has to defend herself alone, then China might have a chance to achieve that objective now. because they have overwhelming military power, and if they can use that to attack Taiwan, in the meantime, conduct a blockade of Taiwan, then Taiwan doesn't have the resources to sustain the fight. So, but if Taiwan's friend, a coalition of friends, come to Taiwan's aid and provide the kind of help to help Taiwan defend herself, then 2027, 2030, 2049 becomes meaningless because China can't win. It will basically disrupt China's ability to mass the forces and focus on their primary objective of striking Taiwan when they have to worry about defending from all around the area the coalition forces that's coming to help Taiwan.
I want to pick up on what Mr. Hu said. You talked about 2027, 2030, 2049. Do you have as much confidence that there is deterrence into 2049, 2030?
So I take maybe a little different tact. I think that Taiwan has the potential to deter the PRC or the CCP from invading Taiwan indefinitely because of the cost associated with an invasion.
So you're actually on the same page?
We are. The temptation is always there.
Yeah, but I would say that Xi Jinping might make an irrational decision or and just order the military to do something. So it's not based on necessarily calculations, but rather his own personal decision.
Yeah, the emotion. He feels that's his job, that's his role. He's going to be the greatest person in Chinese history by annexing Taiwan and say, hey, I'm greater than Mao.
So it's a personal legacy, it's a sort of personal ambition.
Legacy, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Japan's Nikkei has expressed regret over the confusion caused by a February 28th newspaper article that said up to 90% of retired Taiwanese military officers visited China, with a portion collaborating with Beijing for money. Nikkei said the views expressed in the report were of the interviews only and not Nikkei's. This report by Damon Lin and Jaime Oko.
This report from Japan's Nikkei newspaper says that up to 90% of retired Taiwanese officers have provided intelligence to China in exchange for money. It cites unnamed military sources for its claim. The lurid accusation prompted Taiwan's Minister of Veteran Affairs to issue a heated response.
怎么会连日本人都来侮辱我们呢？所以我回了一句很不好听的话，我说放他妈屁，有违反了国安的法令，我们会退出他的退出，就是停止他的退出。太好了。
It's far from the first time Taiwan's military has faced accusation of spies in its ranks. Numerous cases have come to light of China bribing both active and retired military officials in Taiwan. They are usually lured with things like expensive trips and money. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory, and in recent years, Beijing has stepped up its military aggression with threats of invasion. And that means both sides are desperate to know what the other is planning.
The intelligence agencies on both sides made many attempts and efforts to recruit sources from the other side. I mean, Taiwan does it, China does it. It's just part of what countries do in peacetime to adversarial forces.
Taiwan's military has cracked down on suspected espionage cases in recent years. That includes increasing fines and jail time for those caught providing information to China. But the country's defense ministry dismissed Nikkei's claims that 90% of retired officers are providing intel.
以不明的消息来源质疑国军为国忠诚度，相关的报道凭空杜撰，没有经过查证，就以耸动标题污蔑国军官兵气节，分化部队团结。
While Taiwan's authorities have firmly rebutted the numbers in this report, the problem of Chinese spies in Taiwan is something the country's military says is a serious threat. And analysts say that Taiwan should reinforce security within its ranks.
It's very likely that they still have some sources, some spies within right now that we're not aware of. And generally, I think the focus should be on the information security practices within the military.
While Taiwan bolsters its defenses against external threats with things like fighter jets, tanks, and weapons, the military will also have to be on the lookout for threats within the country's own borders. Damon Lin and Jaime Ocon for Taiwan Plus.
That report by Damon Lin and Jaime Ocon. Now, when it comes to Israel, the military plays a special role in the nation. It has been the defender of the people and the state from the very beginning, or even before Israel was established.
Let me tell you a secret. The key to our existence is not our weapons. It's our soldiers. Our spirit, our passion, our love. For us, no distance is too far, no ocean too vast, no mission too complicated.
We get the job done.
When our new soldiers are sworn in, they pledge, if necessary, to sacrifice their lives for Israel.
All of us, in blue, in green, in white, in beige, generals and privates, active duty and reserves, we're ready to take any risk to ensure the survival of Israel.
However, the Israeli Defense Forces role goes beyond defense. It's a social mechanism, inspires technological innovation and drives economic development. Gemon, how can Israel's secret help Taiwan?
So one of the key aspects, as you mentioned, was innovation. And innovation has played an important role since the very beginning. Israel was denied weapons in the 1948 war due to a UN blockade. However, the Arab countries surrounding it had been trained and had been armed by the British during World War II. So there was a clear disadvantage, and so they had to sneak weapons into Israel and to get around it. So from the very beginning, they had to be innovative and creative and to solve their problems. And for example, many people don't know that Iron Dome was created as a response to the missiles that were fired by Hezbollah in 2006. But actually, the money and the government refused to fund the project. So several of the Rafael engineers actually on their own time developed the Iron Dome system, and then it was proven, and then the government decided to take it on. So that's an example where people disregard restrictions on something that they strongly believe in.
And so you're saying that this innovation can apply to Taiwan how?
In the idea that everyone should feel empowered to provide suggestions, improvements in the military, in the security establishment, and in the economy. I think my understanding is a lot of people feel like their voice is not heard. So a lot of the, let's say, senior leaders of companies and in the military don't always listen to their younger personnel. And that's a generalization. Obviously, there's lots of other things going on, but this is an area that I think Taiwan can learn from Israel. Israel also has a whole system of human resource development. From a young age, young Israelis are identified as having certain talents, whether it's in science, whether it's in social studies, whether it's in physical capabilities. They're recruited and developed throughout their initial service. And this spawns all kinds of innovation.
Mr. Hu, I mean, how long would it take Taiwan to develop the sort of systems and thinking that Gemont mentioned?
I think it doesn't take long. However, it is an uphill battle just because of the Chinese psychological warfare against Taiwan. Because if you look at Israel, they instilled the idea of national defense since the kids are young, the importance of unity in defending the country. Israel is a very diverse country, but yet in terms of national defense.
Is it really that diverse, Mr. Hu?
Well, Israel does have Palestinian populations, and also people immigrate to Israel, Jewish people immigrate to Israel from different parts of the world. So it is kind of diverse, where Taiwan actually, it is more single Chinese race, where the mixture is not as bad, but within that race, you see that the division between standing up for Taiwan as its own political entity and supporting unifying with China, or I shouldn't use the word unifying, but becoming one with the mainland China as a one larger Chinese community. That division, unfortunately, affects the, like I mentioned earlier, the will to fight, and anything that somebody suggests for strengthening the military organization, military capability, you see objection from the other side saying, hey, you know, this is not good, this is encouraging a war, and we don't want war. So
just want to pick you up on what you said, you know, if there is no unity, it is hard to have that will to fight. So is there any truth in, you know, that was one report, but obviously there have been many, about the issue of loyalty in the senior military ranks, because these people came over from China, you know, in 1949, or families from those people.
Right.
Is there any truth?
I don't believe so, because, you know, I work from the U.S. side. I work with Taiwan military for over 30 years, and I have many, many friends who retired or still in service with the Republic of China military, and I certainly do not agree with the 90% figure. Certainly, many of my friends retired and have taken a leisure or business trip to China. A small number of them actually attended events of questionable value. So are there some that actually helps China? I'm sure there are, but I will put that in a very, very small single-digit number versus the 90%. I would say overwhelming majority of them are loyal to Taiwan, to the Republic of China.
And President Tsai Ing-wen is in command of Taiwan's defense, Gemont. This is obviously one of the accusations, is that therefore she's not fully in command.
Well, I just go back a little bit on what Tony said about Israel and its diversity. 70% of the original population of Israel came from Arab countries. The Jews were kicked out of those countries, so they come from North Africa and the Middle East. And then over time, many Jews suffered persecution from around the world and ended up in Israel. So you have Jews from Ethiopia who are black. You have Jews from Ukraine, from the Ukraine war, that are, let's say Eastern European looking. And so the whole racial part is very diverse, and the traditions that they come from are also very diverse. So, and also most people don't realize that actually 20% of the population of Israel is not Jewish. And you have of those 20%, 17% are Muslim, and another 2% are Christian, and another 1% over other religions. So it's not 100% Jewish. Okay. And a lot of those people who are not Jewish volunteer to be soldiers in the military.
So what is it that makes it so unified?
So I would say the primary reason that helps unify Israel is a common threat. The idea that they're going to be annihilated by their neighbors is a unifying concept.
So let's take it back to Taiwan. So Taiwan's, pro, let's say, unification, pro-independence. One side believes in this annihilation, and the other side believes, maybe I should ask Mr. Hu.
Well,
they don't believe that they will be annihilated.
I think they believe it's better to live under a communist system than fight for a free democratic system, which I think is an erroneous idea, because if you think by joining the communist system that you don't lose anything, you actually lose a lot of the freedom that people here enjoy.
Very hard-fought freedoms.
Right. So historically, if you sacrifice liberty to live another day, you often lose that both sides, because sometimes they still suppress you and kill you after you already say, okay, you can take over. So I think this is something many people need to take a deeper look. Do you really believe just allowing communism to take over Taiwan, that your life won't change? It will change. It will change.
If you look at the example of Hong Kong, I mean, there are a lot of people who are being disappeared every day there and never to be seen again. If you look at what's happening in Tibet, or looking at what's happening in East Turkestan, which is they call Xinjiang, or the lack of religious freedom in China, this is a problem. So I think people who believe that Taiwan is okay to be under some kind of communist rule are under the misperception of what that is, and they might think that they have a special relationship, but that relationship will end as soon as the PLA occupies the island.
I agree, because just look at the court system. In China, that court system is a machinery of the government. So there's no a very unbiased court. So you see they have like 99% conviction rate. It's impossible. So even simple things like that, people should take a closer look.
I want to dig a bit deeper into what I raised before, which is, the narrative of, the questioning the loyalty of Taiwan's defense is that Taiwan is not in control of its defense, its Department of Defense, its defense. Is this part of the information warfare?
This is absolutely part of the information warfare, that China tried to get the people of Taiwan think that your defense is weak, your defense is useless, you cannot resist me, give up now. But that's absolutely not true. As you mentioned earlier, we'll look at the power survey of Taiwan later on. Once again, I've been working with Taiwan since I was in the Air Force. I come over with the F-16 cell, and also I had the opportunity to visit pretty much every military around the Asia-Pacific region and exercise with them. So by comparison, Taiwan is pretty strong. So absolutely, MND has full control, and there's no truth in the fact that they're not under control.
China has announced it's increasing defense spending by more than 7% this year, though many experts believe Beijing underreports the real figure. At the same conference, outgoing Chinese Premier Li Keqiang reiterated the communist intention to unify with Taiwan. This report by Klein Wang and Bing Wang.
The annual two-sessions meeting in Beijing opened to thunderous applause from China's top officials. The country's most important political gathering takes place over 2 weeks to set the national agenda and the ruling Communist Party's policies for the coming year. Outgoing Premier Li Keqiang gave a short speech on China's Taiwan policy, which remains unchanged.
我们要坚持贯彻新时代党解决台湾问题的总体方略，坚持一个中国原则和9·2共识，坚决反独促统。
China has recently ramped up its military drills around Taiwan and has said it would take the island nation by force if necessary. That's despite the Communist Party in Beijing never having ruled Taiwan. Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council, responsible for cross-strait policies, replied to Li's comments. We once again call for Beijing's recognition of the fact that the two sides of the Taiwan Strait are not subordinate to one another. They should respect the people of Taiwan for upholding the Republic of China's sovereignty and believing in freedom and democracy, and stop trying to divide the nation. Chinese officials are projecting a 5% GDP growth, a modest prediction after missing the mark in 2022. But military spending will increase 7.2% to $225 billion, faster than the economy is expected to grow. This is the first two-sessions meeting since Xi began his norm-breaking third term as president. Analysts say China could see drastic changes as Xi looks to further consolidate his power. Klein Wang and Bing Wang for Taiwan Plus.
Li Keqiang referred to the Taiwan question. What does this say about how they view Taiwan?
Well, that was a trigger word for me because I recall history, and history mentions that Adolf Hitler used the term the Jewish question and his plan to annihilate the Jews in Europe. And so when a communist country or an authoritarian regime uses the word the Taiwan question, to me, those are code words for their desire to control Taiwan. And I would highly suggest that the audience look at history and how authoritarian regimes treat countries that surround them, as in Ukraine as an example.
Mr. Hu, would you agree that there is that very sinister use of wording there? Maybe, is it intentional? Is it a mistake?
It is worrisome how they look at Taiwan as a question. I think, unfortunately, that they don't see the importance of maintaining peace and co-prosperity, where if they give peace a chance, where both China and Taiwan prospers, then maybe one day, 3-4 decades from now, peaceful unification might take place, or peaceful separation. But in any case, what's good for Chinese people, the Chinese nation as a whole, is to maintain peace so both sides prosper, and not get into this, I gotta grab Taiwan before I step down. You know, here I am, 2027, before 2037, I'm pressured to do something, type of mentality, and I believe that's what she's facing. So the way they talk, you can tell they are sort of on a timeline to solve so-called the Taiwan question.
So, Gemot, we talked about the increase that Chinese Communist parties are doing, spending in terms of defense, more than 7%. Now, in terms of percentage of GDP, Israel spends currently around 5%, Taiwan around about 2%. You believe that Taiwan should be spending around 5%, is that correct?
That's correct. And, you know, it's interesting, too, that Taiwan's neighbor, Japan, has been spending only 1% for a long time. And so now they're jumping to what Taiwan was doing, which is 2%.
Yeah.
And so in regards to Taiwan, the reason I believe that Taiwan should double its investment in defense is because it can afford it without having to raise taxes. Taiwan has foreign assets, capital assets of over $500 billion, and they can spend some of that money, and it would only be a few percentage of that investment. Nobody in Taiwan would suffer from taxes. So now, how in terms of Israel, Israel. Go ahead.
Let me just ask you then.
Sorry.
So why is Taiwan not? If you say that there's this money, the reserves there, why is it not?
I think it's a political problem. I think one of the issues is that in order to get that money spent, the main political parties here have to agree on that. And I believe that one of the political parties doesn't want to spend that kind of money because they're afraid of
a provocation,
of exciting the CCP.
Exactly.
But I think that, you know, when it comes to your national defense, you need to think clearly and realistically and move forward. Otherwise, you're going to be controlled by something that might not even exist.
Mr. Hu, so, you know, say Taiwan next year increased up to 5% of GDP in terms of defense spending. What would happen? What sort of provocation would this be to China?
I think, obviously, anything Taiwan does to help itself with the defense, China will cry foul, and China will turn on its propaganda machine saying, you just want Americans to make more money. Americans have convinced you to buy more because they want to earn more money. And you know, maybe later on we can talk about arms sale process. But truly, I think, I agree totally. Taiwan needs to increase its defense spending. And I also agree that in the legislative yuan, it's difficult to get a budget passed and of any type of significant increase in defense spending. But Taiwan really needs it because they need to have that capability. They need to have those missiles and things here in Taiwan. And in and by itself is a deterrence to prevent war. You buy weapons not because you want to fight a war. You want to deter the war. And this is something I believe Taiwan's politicians need to come together and recognize. If you want to survive and continue this very safe, peaceful, democratic society, you need to be able to deter war. And one way to do so is to be strong. And even if you want to negotiate with China, like KMT is proposing, you need to be able to negotiate from a position of relative strength. Otherwise, they can just dictate their terms. You don't listen, I'm going to hit you. So,
and which is exactly what we're seeing in Ukraine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is something I think absolutely Taiwan needs to do, and to maintain peace, maintain stability in Taiwan. They do need to increase defense spending.
Come on.
And just look at what happened to Japan when they announced that they were going to double their budget.
Oh my God.
You had North Korea, you had Russia and the CCP all screaming bloody murder.
Yeah.
While these three countries have nuclear weapons, and Japan has none, and Taiwan has none. So they're going to cry like little babies.
Yeah. And for sure, Japan's not going to go attack Russia, North Korea, or China. It's purely for defense. Now they can't, force Japan to do something because Japan's getting stronger. Same thing. Only the aggressors will complain a country buying defensive weapon. Only the aggressors. So I think
a better word is bully.
Bullies, thank you, that too. So anybody who's doesn't have desire to attack other country, they don't care. You can get wherever you want. I won't touch you, you won't touch me. It's peace.
Gemon, you mentioned nuclear, and as we mentioned at the top of the show, under the KMT government in the 1960s, Israel actually partnered with Taiwan to build a nuclear weapons program. It never actually eventuated, it was dismantled. But given the increased threat to Taiwan and the existential threat, what are Taiwan's options? Should the world or the US be considering bringing Taiwan under a nuclear umbrella?
So Taiwan was under a nuclear umbrella from 1955 until 1979. So that's about 25 years. There were nuclear weapons stationed in Taiwan, tactical nuclear weapons. And actually that was used to hold back Mao from harassing Taiwan in the late 50s. We had the second Taiwan crisis, and President Eisenhower was very clear to Mao and said, back off or we'll nuke you.
So this was when Taiwan and US had a mutual defense treaty.
And even what's even more incredible was the fact that China had no nuclear weapons, but they were still very aggressive. After 1964, China developed its own nuclear weapons. So yes, I believe strongly that the U.S. should make a commitment to put Taiwan under a nuclear umbrella to protect it from an aggressive totalitarian state. And if Taiwan can't get under a nuclear umbrella, well, I think Japan and South Korea, even though they are under a nuclear umbrella, are talking about the potential for developing their own nuclear weapons. It's a discussion in public. These are realistic threats. And the U.S., if the U.S. doesn't come up with a solution, Taiwan needs to defend itself. And so whatever that solution is, it needs to pursue it. And either you play or you don't play. And the consequences. In fact, I believe that South Korea threatened to develop nuclear weapons if the U.S. military left South Korea. They announced that. And then the U.S. retrograded back into saying that we'll keep forces in South Korea. So it's a big issue.
Mr. Hu, so would developing, the counter-argument to Gemon's is always, would this not increase tensions and therefore increase the threat?
Certainly. Many years ago when I was in the Pentagon, we looked at what are the true red lines for China, because China keep on saying selling F-16 is a red line. That's bogus. So we look at those red lines. Number one, obviously, Taiwan independence. If Taiwan declares independence, China's going to attack, right? We believe another red line is if Taiwan develops a nuclear weapon, and the third one is if foreign troops attack Taiwan and China will get involved. So why? The reason being, China will never allow Taiwan to achieve a nuclear parity where Taiwan can implement the mutual assured destruction strategy, where you use nuclear against me, I'm going to use nuclear weapon against you, and use that as a way to achieve independence. So I suspect China will attack Taiwan even before Taiwan can successfully develop a nuclear weapon. So it is destabilizing. And I sort of agree that if necessary, United States should provide Taiwan the nuclear umbrella. However, I also do not believe China will use nuclear weapon against Taiwan because can you imagine
it's too close to China itself.
That is not a reason, but the fact that you wipe out so many Chinese people, and the history is going to show, this is the type of government that's willing to kill people of its own blood. So I don't think they can go down in history. They want to go down in history as such. So personally, I don't think China will ever use nuclear weapon against Taiwan. On the other hand, if they threaten Taiwan with nuclear weapon, I certainly believe that the free world should also hold China at risk with nuclear weapon.
Gemont.
As we recall, during the Russian-Ukrainian war, Russia clearly made a threat to any country providing troops to Ukraine. And so I believe that the Chinese Communist Party will use the same kind of threat when it decides to do something against Taiwan. So they will say something like, anyone interfering will risk nuclear war with us, and to prevent the Japanese, the Filipinos, the South Koreans, anybody, and including the United States, from intervening in what they consider an internal activity. And so given that is a potential area of concern, then the US, Taiwan, and the rest of Taiwan's friends need to consider what would happen if China made that kind of threat. If that's the case, then not having a nuclear umbrella puts Taiwan at risk and gives the United States a free out. So I would strongly encourage the U.S. to make some kind of a commitment. It doesn't have to say a mutual defense agreement, but it could say something like, if you're attacked, and we will come to your aid. And not if Taiwan attacks, which was the fear during Chiang Kai-shek's rule. Okay, we got that. But if they make an agreement that delineates under what circumstance the United States would intervene, I think the Taiwanese government, the Taiwanese people, the American people, and the Chinese, the communist Chinese, and the people living in China will understand what are the red lines for us. Why are we so concerned about their red lines? They should know our red lines. And right now we have no red lines because we have this ambiguity, silliness.
Mr. Hu, you in your past life were part of or responsible for arms sales to Taiwan. Can you take us through the process of how the US decides, what weapons to sell a country? And also, because we're talking about asymmetric versus symmetric weapons, at what point in the process can the US deny a country the weapons that it seeks?
Good question. And I've seen many questions raised about this. The fact is, all arms sales start with a request from the country who wants to buy, in this case, Taiwan. But even before that, because the United States and Taiwan had such close military relationship, a lot of discussion takes place when Taiwan thinks it needs something. Usually we look at capability, and that capability is to address a threat. So if China has certain threat that Taiwan don't have a way to defend against, then the United States and Taiwan sits down and look at the threat and say, okay, here's a requirement. There's a gap in our ability to defend against this threat. Then we look at what kind of capability that's required. Then together we look at, within that capability, what weapon system is best. Something that Taiwan can purchase, can use, and stuff. Once that's decided, then Taiwan submit a request. Once that request goes to the United States government, what we do is we go through an interagency process where everybody sit down from different departments to look at this request, this item, and decide whether it is a valid sale. Because remember, before it was only M&D and DOD. Now the other departments all get involved. So we look at can Taiwan afford it? Can Taiwan support it? We don't want Taiwan to buy it and just like a static display, right? And also, will Taiwan use it for its intended purpose? Because some country buy the weapon, years later they use the weapon against its own people. Or is there a third country sell threat? Some country buys the weapon from the United States, and a few years later they turn around and sell it to a country that the United States would not have sold the weapon to. So we look at all of that, and also we look at what's the impact on regional security. You don't want to introduce a new weapon to a region which starts an arm race. So a new capability then the other side raises and another country raises, you cause instability in the region.
Let's focus on Taiwan. So you talked about, that this comes from a perceived threat. In your view, from your many years of experience, how do you think China might launch, a taking of Taiwan by force?
We wargame this to death, obviously, and to me, the most dangerous scenario is not necessarily an amphibious landing like everybody's focused on. China has to achieve a quick victory. In Chinese, it's called 速战速决. That means they have to bring massive firepower to overwhelm Taiwan's defense capability. And to achieve that, it's very hard for them to achieve a military victory in any war. Okay, so you want to achieve a political victory. If you look at what Putin had intended to do in Ukraine, he was going to take Kyiv, grab the president, and make him surrender so they don't have to continue to fight. Obviously, they failed in that objective. China is going to try the same. Okay, they're going to try to grab the leadership and make the leadership surrender, because if you look at the amphibious landing, they cannot bring sufficient firepower onto Taiwan to achieve a quick victory. So in my view, what they will do is they will load up their Ro-Ro ship with hundreds of tanks and troops, thousands of troops, and they will move toward Taiwan, loiter, because it's a civilian-looking ship. They will try to loiter maybe just off Taiwan's territorial water of 12 nautical miles. In the meantime, they might start moving their amphibious ship from China 125 nautical miles away. It's going to take them about 6-7 hours to get to Taiwan. So what they want to do is they want to initiate that, get Taiwan troops to spread out. If we look at the map of Taiwan, this is 125 kilometers, and the amphibious troop goes around 17 to 20 knots, and it's not kilometers, it's nautical miles. So it takes 6-7 hours to get here. In the meantime, if they have civilian ship loiter here, as they initiate the attack, they will start with a cyber attack first. They will start with cyber, go with missile, create chaos. During that chaotic time, they're going to have helicopters flying over and paratroopers try to take over a port so they can offload massive amount of firepower quickly to achieve their goal. So I think the most dangerous place is Taipei Port. Taipei Port has many areas where the helicopters can land, the paratroopers can land, and if they combine with the fifth element, the spies that's already in Taiwan, and if they take over Taipei Port, those Ro-Ro ships that's just off 12 nautical miles away can rush in. In less than an hour, they can be offloading. Well, these ships are still coming while Taiwan troops are around here preventing an amphibious landing, and the troops around here will be overwhelmed.
So how does Taiwan defend against that? What weapons does it need?
Okay, and Taiwan has majority of the weapons. If they can defend the port, they need to mine it so the enemies can get in, or blow it up so the enemies can use it.
So sea mines.
Sea mines, and also Taiwan needs to have the missiles that can knock down the missile that's coming, and they need to have anti-ship missiles that can knock out those ships, especially these Ro-Ro ships coming in. But most important of all, Taiwan needs to have a very robust and redundant command and control system. Because when the war starts, the chaos, what we call fog of war, those things give China a gap where Taiwan's confusion allowed them to approach and do things that because they created the fog of war and they are more clear in their objective. Where Taiwan, if the leadership loses command and control, it's very dangerous. So a redundant and robust command and control system, air missile defense systems, anti-ship systems. Those are important things, and Taiwan already have, but they need to increase the numbers.
And are these classed as asymmetric or symmetric?
Well, if you look at sea mines, okay, that's asymmetric. But if you look at the Patriots, the TK3s, they are major systems. And I believe Taiwan must have a mixture. I'm not a big fan of totally asymmetric because if you look at the current gray zone activities, you need those ships, those battleship, combat ships, you need fighter aircraft to go out there and push that gray zone stuff back. If you only go asymmetric with missiles and stuff, and what happens if the airplane fly just off your border, you're gonna shoot them down? You can't, you gotta push them back way out there. You gotta demonstrate strength. You gotta demonstrate response to those gray zone stuff. So it needs to be a mixture of symmetric and asymmetric capabilities.
Okay. Do you want to respond to what Mr. Hu said?
Again, I agree with what he's saying, but I would be, some specific weapon systems are needed. And for example, the Seahawk was a plane that was designed to counter submarines, specifically the PLA Navy submarines, that put at risk any ships that come and go to Taiwan, and that needs to be implemented. The other thing, and the current Seahawks that they have are very old. Another aircraft that needs to be implemented is the E-2D. Currently, the E-2K is almost 50, 60 years old, and it needs to be completely updated. And there's a lot of pushback in Washington about these aircraft, but they were approved by the previous administration. And the current administration is pushing back. So I believe that Taiwan should look at what it needs, and rather than be kowtowed to what the Americans think that they should need. In the case of Taiwan, remember that they developed their own weapon systems because other countries refused to give them weapon systems. And I think I've mentioned the Israelis, you mentioned earlier, the Israelis provided weapon systems to Taiwan.
Hello, I'm Ika Vat of Taiwan Talks. We just discussed Taiwan's defense and the Israeli Defense Forces. What we want to know from you is what Taiwan can learn from Israel. If you like the show, please remember to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Take care and see you next time.